They see these two corpses lying on the ground, and they're like, oh no, we don't want to just denounce the shooter and mourn the victims. We want to find a way to use this to our political advantage, to demonize people who criticize Israel, to demonize people who protest against the destruction of Gaza by saying they're the same. They're the same people. Anyone who has ever chanted Free Palestine is exactly like this killer and responsible for him because he too chanted Free Palestine. Which again would be like if someone goes and murders an abortion doctor and then screams abortion is murder, and then suddenly everybody who has ever said abortion is murder, which is what the pro-life movement is based on, is now the same as the person who shoots the abortion doctor in his house, the same, they're responsible for the violence? Of course not. But they all move so quickly to exploit politically these killings to try and demonize and ultimately suppress criticism of Israel or protest against it in the United States. Needless to say, one of the leaders of this sleazy effort was Bari Weiss, who spent a few years greatly profiting off of posturing as a free speech advocate or whatever when it came to like the college kids who criticize Israel. She's like, oh, they're so illiberal and they want to ban a bunch of speech. But now we've seen a massive assault on the First Amendment against people criticizing Israel, protesting against Israel, and she has very little to say. But she, needless to say, exploited these killings as well by saying this, quote, venomous, untrue statements about Israel, its supporters, and the war against Hamas in Gaza have chipped away at the old taboo against open anti-Semitism in America. Listen to what she's saying there. Venomous, untrue statements about Israel, its supporter, and the war against Hamas in Gaza is what is causing anti-Semitism. So if you say what all human rights organizations on the planet basically are saying, that what's happening in Gaza is a genocide, that it's ethnic cleansing, that they're war crimes. Just this week, a former Israeli prime minister said Israel is right on the verge of a major war crime in Gaza, even though they've clearly crossed that line. You have Israelis saying that as well. But Bari Weiss now wants to say the real crime here is not the murder of these two people. The real crime is criticizing Israel, saying mean things about Israel, criticizing Israel harshly. She goes on, constant demonization of American Jews and Zionists is how a democratic state and its supporters have been made into targets. You know what? Zionism is an ideology. It's a new ideology. It's existed for maybe 120 years. When it was introduced, huge numbers of religious Jews thought it was blasphemy. That Jews are not a nation state. You don't build a nation state based on Judaism. We've had Orthodox rabbis on our show who hate the state of Israel and Zionism. Zionism has been debated for a long time. You're allowed to oppose Zionism. You're allowed to say you think it's a ethno-supremacist ideology that requires the stealing of land from people, the maintenance of Jewish supremacy. And here's Bari Weiss, crocodile tears about the victims, excitement over how she gets to use it, to try and say the real guilty parties are here are people who are criticizing Israel or Zionism. She goes on, quote, it is how the, quote, permissive structure for violence against Jews in America has been erected. Growing up, learning about Simon of Trent or other medieval blood libels, I wondered how something so unnatural, so deranged could ever happen. How lies could spread so far, transmorgify into a movement, in fact, culture so comprehensively and engender deadly action. Young Bari was like, how could that happen? How could it possibly be the case that this animus toward a group could manifest in violence? And she says, those who participate in this culture of lies and who now want to distance themselves from yesterday's violence will insist that the alleged killer's acts do not represent them. Right, exactly. Going up to two young people on the street and shooting them in the head does not represent people protesting against the genocide in Gaza. In fact, it's the opposite. The people protesting that destruction of Gaza are opposed to this kind of violence against innocent people. That's what's driving the movement. But she wants to reverse that and pretend that the only people who love violence, who are encouraging violence, are the people protesting the Israeli slaughter of huge numbers of civilians in Gaza, not the people actually doing it. So she says now people are pretending that the alleged killer's acts do not represent them, that it harms their movement. But how can anyone honest with themselves not draw a connection between a culture that says Zionists are anti-humans, even Nazis themselves, and the terrorists now attacking Jews across the globe? Because, Barry, you're allowed to compare the Israeli actions in Gaza to what Nazis have done. The Nuremberg trials taught us, pronounced, that the only way the Nuremberg trials will be of any value, which found convicted Nazi war criminals and then punished them, often sentenced them to death, they emphasized the only way this will have any validity, will be anything other than victor's justice, is if the principles we're pronouncing here apply to all countries in the future, including the ones presiding over the tribunal. You're not allowed, it's not a taboo to compare what the Nazis did to what other people are doing, what other countries are doing, what other genocides are taking place, and certainly not a prohibition to compare it to Israel either. But do you see how these people are adopting this view that they've long claimed they hated? That if Tucker Carlson says he's against immigration and somebody goes and murders black people based on the ground that he thinks immigration is replacing white people, that somehow Tucker Carlson is now the equivalent of or even responsible for the person who went and did that murder? Here's Batar Worldwide, considered a terrorist group in Israel, but has now become the group that Marco Rubio relies on to deport students that Batar says is anti-Semitic. They wrote this, quote, "Will Washington, D.C. and other American cities take responsibility for allowing violent chants of no Zionist here and Intifada chants which have led to this terrorist attack?" Here in the United States, maybe not in Israel, but here in the United States, you're allowed to chant political slogans. There are almost no protesters against the war in Gaza who are going around encouraging or calling for the killing of Jews. So many Jews are part of those protests. That's an absolute lie. But even if you wanted to read it that way, these are political slogans that are protected by our First Amendment in the United States of Americans that we're not going to dilute or suspend to protect a foreign country. He goes on, "This blood is on the hands of politicians who encourage and allow these violent radicals on American streets." Here's the founder of the group Stop Anti-Semitism, which has basically spent the last year and a half taking pictures of workers at Starbucks or on airplane who work for airlines, who have any sort of Palestinian insignia at all, the Palestinian flag pin, or clothing articles that they claim is linked to Palestinians who are trying to get them fired, generating lynch mobs against them. They once took a picture and published it all over the place of a woman who was doing nothing more than sitting in a coffee shop, and her laptop had pro-Palestinian stickers, and they said she's an evil anti-Semite. She purposely went into a coffee shop where there are a lot of Jews, just constantly trying to erode our free speech rights in America in defense of this foreign country. They, of course, had this person on Fox. Her name is Leora Rez, and here's what she had to say.
Of Stop Anti-Semitism, and thank you for joining us today on this day we will not forget. That interview with Katie Kalischer was extraordinary. And we also had an interview last hour with a woman by the name of Jojo Kalin. She organized last night's event, and she addressed it the following way with us. Watch here.
I think as someone who actually flew to Israel in December 2023 to volunteer on the ground, I've experienced air sirens and rockets, and I've had to run to safe rooms. And this was far scarier than that. It was so intimate. And so to feel more at fear as a diaspora Jew in the United States than in Israel is something I'm contending with and grappling with. But I think what we need to do is not let the terrorists win and not let this act of depravity and hatred strip us of our humanity.
I imagine you reflect a lot of that same sentiment. It's still early. We're only 13 hours into this story. Your thoughts?
Oh, that's plenty of time to exploit the corpses. 13 hours is plenty of time. People were doing it way before 13 hours.
Shocked, heartbroken. However, we're not surprised. in 2023, Stop Anti-Semitism had actually featured Elias Rodriguez's group out of Chicago, the Party for Socialism and Liberation, where they had plastered a University of Illinois campus with, quote, "Exterminate the Zionists" stickers, which is just a modern-day spin on Nazi-esque "Exterminate the Jews" propaganda. And when we had alerted the mayor's office and the university about it, we heard nothing. Fast forward to 2024, countless protesters were parked outside the Israeli embassy weeks upon weeks. We contacted the mayor's office demanding something to be done. Nothing was done.
Why would you call the mayor's office demanding that they do something about people protesting outside the embassy of a foreign country involved in a ethnic cleansing campaign that they oppose? That's a foundational American right to go protest your own government. Certainly you have the right to go protest foreign governments as well. I want you to understand how these people are trying very hard, seeing the public opinion polls, watching Israel be turned into a pariah, to radically transform and destroy the foundational defining rights of the United States in service of this foreign country to which they have immense loyalty. You call the mayor demanding that people not be allowed to protest outside the Israeli embassy? And I want to get to the point, let me just play the rest of that and get to this claim that people were screaming, "Exterminate Zionism" or "Exterminate Zionists," as though that is a Nazi type slogan. I'm going to get to that in a second.
So this culmination of both events, along with 600 days of calls for global intifada, calls to harm Jews across the country from coast to coast, this is exactly what we thought and expected or tragically happened.
Okay. Exterminate Zionists, I haven't heard that phrase. I remember for the first year after October 7th, when the campus protest movement was being demonized and treated as satanic, I kept hearing people tell me, oh no, these people aren't against Israel. They're out there chanting, "Kill the Jews, kill all Jews, kill all Jews." And I kept saying, where is that happening on American campuses? Show me who it is who's chanting, "Kill all Jews." And nobody could ever show me an example. I asked many times on social media, please, anyone who has any example of student groups or protesters on campuses chanting, "Kill all Jews" or "Kill the Jews," send that to me, because that didn't happen. And they would, the one example that they would point to is there was some protest in Australia outside of the Sydney Opera House in the 2 weeks following the October 7th attack, and one guy in the crowd said, "Kill the Jews," and he was immediately shouted down by the other protesters. That was not an American campus. That was in Australia. That was a single person. This idea that people are going around and saying, "Exterminate the Jews, exterminate Zionists," that is not true. But what is true is that people are constantly going around saying, "Exterminate Hamas." And in Israel, they're saying, "Kill all Gazans, kill all Palestinians." We had a member of Congress in the United States who dressed up in a IDF military uniform, the military uniform of a foreign country, who went to the floor of the United States Senate, of the United States House, and said there are no innocent people in Gaza. There are no innocent babies in Gaza, dressed in a IDF uniform. You want to hear some inflammatory and insightful genocidal rhetoric? Here is Randy Fine, who Donald Trump endorsed as an America First candidate who took over Matt Gaetz's congressional seat. I think he might have actually taken over Mike Waltz's congressional seat. And he is this extremely obese, one-issue person. His issue is Israel. That's his only issue. And he has said some of the most genocidal things I've heard. When someone says, "Oh, babies in Gaza have been murdered," he's like, "Oh, show me the pictures, show me more." He's a sociopath, he's a psychopath. Donald Trump supported him as America First, even though his only issue is not America, it is Israel. I believe he's been taking Ozempic because he looks a little less morbidly obese, but even on Ozempic, he's quite obese. And he went on to Fox News, and I want you to listen to what he says is the solution that he sees the final solution for what he called our Muslim terror. Now, unfortunately, many of these people are very disappointed that the killer was not Muslim. Some of them ignore that and pretend it is, and they keep calling this Muslim terrorism, Islamic terrorism. The shooter was not Muslim. I know they were deeply disappointed to find that out that he wasn't. Imagine how much political value they could extract from that. But here's what this newly elected congressman of Tel Aviv said on Fox News.
The fact of the matter is the Palestinian cause is an evil one.
Yeah, and Congressman, there is a ceasefire deal on the table right now that
the Palestinian cause is an evil one. The Palestinian cause, trying to get the war stopped, trying to get a Palestinian state, it is an evil cause, he says.
The White House is hoping both Israel and Hamas will sign on to. Does this shooting change anything when it comes to the course of the war or the negotiations to end it?
Well, I think it speaks to the importance of the only end of the conflict is complete and total surrender by those who support Muslim terror. In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
We heard in Brooks.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. If you think chanting Free Palestine is some inherently violent, bigoted slogan that is likely to incite anti-Semitic violence, how about going on TV as a member of Congress and saying the pro-Palestinian movement is inherently evil and that this entire culture, this entire Islamic culture needs to be wiped out, exterminated with nuclear weapons like we did the Japanese in World War II? You think that might incite violence against Muslims or against pro-Palestinian protesters? All kinds of causes, all kinds of rhetoric, all kinds of views have the potential to incite violence, and that one certainly has. And there has been hate crimes against Palestinians since October 7th in the United States, even though it got 1/100th the attention of last night's killing. To say nothing of the ongoing ethnic cleansing and genocide in Gaza, which is killing 5,000, 10,000 people each week, children, babies, one after the next, destroying all Palestinian society. The Israeli officials are saying that is our goal, to level the entire thing and drive everybody out and take Gaza for ourselves. The level of horrific violence and genocidal behavior and evil is so much greater there. But of course, we don't know the name of a single Palestinian victim, not one. We don't know, we don't hear about their life stories, we don't hear about their dreams, we don't hear about the couple that's about to be engaged, or the newly married one who just had a baby and got blown up. They're barely people, we just almost never hear about them. That's a typical propaganda tactic. It could happen in the war on terror too. If one Muslim killed a Westerner, their name would be all over the place. We would hear from their family members, their shattered dreams, their aspirations. But nobody could name a single one of the hundreds of thousands of people blown up, innocent people blown up in the war on terror. Because we make clear decisions about whose life we think has value and whose doesn't. Thanks for watching this clip from System Update, our live show that airs every Monday through Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on Rumble. You can catch the full nightly shows live or view the backlog of episodes for free on our Rumble page. You can also find full episodes the morning after they air across all major podcasting platforms, including Spotify and Apple. All the information you need is linked below. We hope to see you there.